to your syllabus or your project, first of all. My more formal presentation will be tomorrow, and we'll talk a bit about some of the theory and practice with relationship to what you're doing. But one of the things I just wanted to make clear for everyone is that, first of all, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine in terms of the presentation. We're going to make sure that you're fine. So please kind of try to exhale with regard to that. And I will call my school back in a minute. And the other thing that I wanted to tell you is that with regard to those who are creating syllabi for your courses, we're relying upon your expertise, right? So my job is to facilitate, my expertise, as it were, with regard to our conversation, will be to facilitate your expertise, right? So I'm not coming in as a content area specialist unless you happen to be a political scientist or someone dealing specifically with religion, because those are my areas of content expertise. However, I do have expertise with regard to pedagogy, which goes across the board. So I'm going to present my engagement with you with regard to how I can help you to organize the content which you specialize in order to gain maximum effect, right? And we'll talk about that. One final thing about that, as you're thinking about your syllabus, one organizing principle that I've used that comes out of my research that's been very helpful to our professors here over the years, since year one, has been something that I call RVLs, reading, viewing, and listening. It helps those of us, especially who are baby boomers, to stay true to digital literacies. So instead of looking at a syllabus as being organized around required reading or recommended reading only, that if we think in terms of RVLs, then that forces us to think, okay, what's the required reading, what's the required viewing, and what is the required listening that I might embed in the curriculum in terms of helping my students to understand text in a variety of ways aside from the written word. And those students who are working on your projects, they will be very, very different. We know that based on your own context, but just dig into what you consider to be a real problem and ask yourself, how can you marry what you've learned this week and last week to the individual project? And you can be as creative as possible. So not to worry about that either. So anybody just tug on my jacket and we'll get a sidebar, but no, we'll have more formal time to dive deeply into things tomorrow. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
And Bill for letting me use that time.
Pleasure. Should I just start in?
Yes, it's my pleasure to introduce the Director of Academic Development for ISGAP, Bill Kolbrener.
Thank you. What day are we in of this conference gathering? Day 8. Anybody have and when I go to academic conferences, I always feel conference fatigue. I have to admit to feeling it less here, and it's maybe just starting to kick in this afternoon. So I thought we would do something a little bit different, and I'm improvising a little bit from what I had said that I would be doing. The title of the talk is Identity and Appropriation. What are the means through which I can name myself or create myself, and can I do such in relation, and how do I do so in relationship to others without appropriation? That's a little coming attraction. Voice and belonging in the omnicultural classroom. You remember Harris used that term omnicultural instead of multicultural. For me, voice and belonging represent two things. One is the individual voice, and the other is how do I represent that voice? How do I express that voice in with people who are different from me, right? So those are a couple of things that I want to do, or here are a couple of things that I want to do. One is to think about, what can I do when I inherit a tradition that seems hostile to me? Okay? You hear the question? No, I didn't. So what can I do when I inherit a tradition that has values that are hostile to mine? Not only they're hostile to mine, but they have a history of wanting to, enslave me, kill me, right? So I'll tell you, I teach John Milton, Paradise Lost. Does everybody, and nobody has heard of John Milton and Paradise Lost, please Google it during the course of this talk. I won't be offended. So when I teach Milton, I teach a Christian poet. I am an expert. I probably know more about Christian theology than almost everybody in this room, because I spent my lifetime studying it. One of the interesting things about the English literary establishment, literary critics, World War II ends. I don't know the exact history of the English or the Comparative Literary Academy in America, but I do know that when English literature really became a thing in the second half of the 20th century, it was Jews who were studying and teaching the tradition of the people 20 years before who wanted to kill them. We talked when Julieta was here about, I don't know if it's resilience, but it's the sense of necessity, that you come into a culture and you figure things out. I personally figured out my own religious life through reading Milton. That was what was available to me. I was not religious beforehand, right? I was brought up pretty much secular. So that's a little bit about where I'm coming from. And the second thing I want to talk about is, how do we nurture a place where we can all belong with our different stories? And how do you tell your story in such a way that it doesn't exclude others from doing so? This is like, in the Olympic events of ice skating, this is not an easy degree of difficulty. This is hard work, right? Okay, so I'm going to start and end with with Oxford. The first is the quotation that some of us saw when we went to the Weston Library in Oxford on Shabbat, and there is an exhibit of books that were gifts to the Bodleian Library. Queen Elizabeth got this gorgeous Geneva Bible, and the heading over it is, "Beware of Greeks bearing gifts." I mean, that's become so. Can somebody give me a history of this, or can somebody explain this? We have class. Naomi, thank God you're here. Go ahead, yeah.
So the line shows up in Virgil's Iliad, which is the
Virgil's Aeneid.
Excuse
Yeah.
me. Yes, you can see up there, and it shows up when somebody, in retrospect, is telling the story of the fall of Troy and how this giant horse appeared outside the gate.
Pictured above
And
from the movie Troy.
they thought,
Yeah.
ooh, how wonderful! Look, we got the Greeks brought us this gift, and of course the Achaeans,
The Greeks, yeah.
the Greeks were hiding inside the horse, and after everybody went to sleep, they came out, they destroyed the city.
So, and if you should also watch the Monty Python version of it, where it's not a horse but a giant rabbit. Now, there are several meanings to this as well. In the Odyssey, Odysseus is the hero, really the hero, the romantic hero, the adventurous hero, the strategic hero. In Virgil's Aeneid, Odysseus becomes, of course, Ulysses, and he's called a criminal. Why is he called a criminal? It's Virgil saying, at the same time that he says to Homer, "I love you so much. Your book is under my pillow every single night." But he's saying, Romans are different. Now, it's interesting here, there's a form of kind of negation and appropriation. Virgil has when beware of Greeks bearing gifts, for him also is beware of his predecessor. The first person in literary tradition is, of course, Homer. And Virgil is the Latin version of Homer. He steals everything from Homer. All the stories. He just changes the names and does a sequel, right? So on the one hand, this is a very interesting model for creativity. On the one hand, he goes and feels reverence for this tradition. He can't live without Homer. But he's also staking his own claim, his own identity. I wanted just to start with that. And now I want to talk a little bit about some of the theological traditions that have been informing some of our discussions. So the first thing to say, and I'm going to be looking at passages from the New Testament. The first thing to say is to read off Luke 16:17. I don't know how many people here know this. It's always the first thing I teach to my students before we read other books of the New Testament. Can you see it? I'm still learning, this technology. It is easier for heaven and earth to pass away than for one tittle of the law to drop. I don't know what the Hebrew is for that. It's translated variously, but the Greek, obviously. Whoever then relaxes one of the least of these commandments and teaches men so shall be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But he who does them and teaches them shall be called great in the kingdom of heaven. So here in the middle of Luke, which has very different representations of Jesus and very different representations of Jews as well, there is assertion of the commonality between the two. Jesus, and this is a book by this guy named Geza Vermesh. I can't imagine he's still alive. He was at Oxford, and he wrote a book called Jesus the Jew. And if you look at the Gospels, and if I tread on anybody's feet, please tell me, okay? When you look at the Gospels, much of the additional doctrines that surround Jesus' life in terms of his messianic role, in terms of his divinity, are not expressed in the same way that they will be by Paul and by later councils. So that's very important for us, right? That we are all, one way or another, part of a similar tradition. We have these texts as part of our tradition. But now we want to look at something a little different. Now, I talked about Virgil and celebrating his creativity. If you were a Greek, you wouldn't feel great about it, right? Because he's kind of, and this often happens, that you create your own identity in relationship to the other. What would be some examples of that?
Cuba.
I need a binary here. It's going to, right? Early Christians and Jews, whites and blacks, slave owners and slave owners and slaves, right? What else? Any others? We'll think of them, right?
Allies versus Axis.
Pardon?
Allies versus Axis.
Okay, right. The gospel writers are experts. This is the story of the Good Samaritan, and I'm emphasizing here, I am not reading this from a normative standpoint, meaning I'm not reading it as a Jew, I'm not reading it as a Christian, I'm reading it as a literary scholar. I am obviously a Jewish literary scholar, so I have to be honest about that. But I do want to read it for its literary characteristics. The painting is a Rembrandt. A certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among thieves, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. And by chance, there came down a certain priest that way, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. And likewise a Levite. What's a Levite? From the Bible? Okay. Oh, it's from the tree. It's from the trees of the tribe of the Levium, of the Levites. Okay, and they're involved. I think it's important to emphasize that they are involved in temple service, right? This is they're caretakers and they're actually involved in the service. And caretakers, right, primarily, right. And likewise, a Levite, when he was at that place, came and looked on him and passed by on the other side. So I'm going to skip the first question. Well, actually, I'm not going to skip the first question. What is this text doing? What work is it achieving? I ask this of every single literary text, not text in my tradition. To me, I'm not. Nathan.
Establishing comparative characters.
Okay, and what about so more here, please. Oh, a priest would be in Hebrew a kohen, right? So there are kohanim and leviim. And if you ever went to a synagogue in the morning, only in Israel, the kohanim still give the priestly blessing, and the leviim in the congregation wash their hands beforehand. We do that like every Sabbath morning. So the emphasis on temple worship is important here. So how is the Jew being represented here, and what work is that representation doing? People understand my question?
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Not well.
Okay.
No, not well. They're not representing the Jew.
Well, right. So this story, and whether it happened or not is not a concern of us. The gospel writer decided to put it in, so it has authority for us, right? So, and why, Naya, just give me a little bit more. Why are they not represented well?
Because there's a man in need,
Yeah.
and what do? They're not good Samaritans, and even more so, they're highly priests, so.
Right, so how is this caste system, I see why I used that term before, how is that caste system represented in the story? How do the priests come off?
Terrible.
Right? I mean, you know, in certain Reform Christian circles, it's, you know, priests don't come off very well, right? And Levites, so we get the priest, the Kohen, and the Levi, and the Levite. What do you get in the second sentence? What is the gospel writer giving us here that we didn't get in the previous one?
What are you talking about?
And likewise, yeah. He actually goes and looks, right? He looks and then he walks away. He sees the suffering and then he walks away.
Wasn't there something to do with clean and unclean though?
Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there, right. Exactly. That is exactly the point. That is, the gospel writer now is bringing the Kohen and the Levi for particular reasons. That the temple service that they represent, that the temple service that they represent is prohibiting them from being humane. Again, this is a story. It is a representation. Whether it happened or not, we weren't CBS News there, right? The story is doing certain work. And the work that it is doing is saying that this new religion that is being founded is going to do away with those distinctions between purity and impurity that prevent people from being humane. That was a very long sentence, but I think you got the point, right?
May I ask,
Yeah, please.
at that time, a reader
Yeah.
would know exactly what he meant by
Listen-
Levite and
Listen, I don't know about the reception of the New Testament. The question is, how much do these words resonate with us now? Did they resonate more in the past? I'm sure they resonated more in the past. Okay. Again, readers. Just readers. I teach this, by the way, right? I teach Homer, I teach Virgil, right? I teach the Romans, I teach Paul, I teach Augustine. All the people I teach my favorite writers are Christian, just so you know this, okay? I like Philip Roth also, right? Therefore, my brethren, you also are become dead to the law by the body of Christ. I meant to, you see that I'm bolding certain words. I should have done dead as well. For when we were in the flesh, the passions of sin, which were by the law, did work in our members to bring fruit unto death. But now we are loosed from the law of death, wherein we were detained, so that we should serve in newness of spirit, and not in oldness of the letter. Who's the author of the letter to the Romans?
Paul.
Right, now it's very important to remember, with all the gospel writers, that they are writing to to the gospel writers and Paul, that they are writing to very specific audiences. The gospel writers themselves come from different social classes. Some are Jews, some are non-Jews. Paul himself, his given name was Shaul, right? He has a revelation at Damascus. In a way, the history of Christianity is almost Paul's psychohistory, right? And in some times, he really goes at the law. In other times, and Diane pointed this out to me, a nuanced reading of all of Romans or all of the New Testament might undermine some of this, right? But this does come down. I saw this when I went to an Anglican service at Canterbury last year. Romans is cited in the Book of Common Prayer, and stuff like this. I don't know the phenomenology of prayer. When you read this, how does it affect you? It affects me. When I read it, it really affects me. I'm sorry. So what are the dichotomies that are being asserted here?
Life and death.
Well, there are different. Well, that life and death is one.
New Testament and Old Testament.
Well, that's implicit, right? So this is the beginning of the New Testament, right?
Law versus the spirit.
So law and spirit.
The law,
Saved
not
versus dead.
subject to the law.
Yeah. What?
Saved versus dead or unsaved.
Oh, right. So or unredeemed. I don't know when does redemption appear in the New Testament? I don't know. I don't know. Here's another one, and I was consulting with Naya about different kinds of images. We'll get to that image on the top in a second. Here's another one. For the wisdom of the flesh is death, but the wisdom of the Spirit is life and peace. For if you live according to the flesh, you shall die. But if by the Spirit you mortify the deeds of the flesh, you shall live. And here is just one of many images of the fleshly Jew. I don't know if we talked about that, Naya. Is that a trope? The bodily Jew. I mean, Shylock in Shakespeare is also, he's known for his body, the excess of his body. The Jew is always in excess, right? In excess of the norm. So here, it's just important, this goes to the point that I just made. I know there are Christians who understand their theology in such a way that this does not become for them a representation of the Jew. But it's there and it's prevalent, right? And where people are not thinking about identity in places, Lisa, maybe I don't know where you live, where people don't maybe have different frameworks or contexts, it's important to talk about these things. One more. This is the one that drives theologians crazy. This is the one that drives liberal theologians crazy, right? Meaning by what I mean by that is how do I deal with this? It's like in Talmud study, you get to something and the interpreters are at a loss. Like, what now? Right? How do I deal with this? How can I save the text? This is from the Gospel of John. Why do you not know my speech? Because you cannot hear my word. You are of your father, the devil, and the desires of your father you will do. Whoopsie, sorry. We don't want to spoil I worked so hard on my presentation. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he stood not in the truth, because truth is not in him. I didn't quote the verse previous in which Abraham is mentioned. Now, the text does not conflate Abraham and the father, right? It does not, but and I know that people who read carefully will say it's not intended to be Abraham, but people like me who read carefully still hear the resonances of Abraham there. And here's just another exercise. You know, the Jew is being called the devil. This is in a sacred work of another tradition, in a country, in a world country in which I live. This is a sacred text. I mean, you can see how that would trigger somebody. I'm not triggered. I'm just pretending to be at the moment. And this is another. Here's an example where we see this in living color today. I wanted to really talk about this because I think it gives the background to some of the things that have been said here. I know my talk a week and a half ago, we talked about progressive anti-Semitism, and I mentioned at the time that it does have Christian origins, Christian universalism. So I wanted to go back to that here, but I also want to emphasize, and this is the next slide, that this does not only happen with Jews, right? Do people know who William Harper is? Apparently people don't read justifications for slavery, which I find fascinating. I mean, just to see how how do they work? So this guy, William Harper, he writes a memoir on slavery. So I was thinking, this must be a slave narrative, right? No, but it's him as a slave owner, right? He's providing a memoir on slavery. So the whole genre, in a way, is very weird, that he's giving this kind of personal testimony. He quotes somebody else. Slavery, as it is said in a Southern periodical work, to which I am indebted for other ideas, a Southern periodical work, a hate rag, has done more in the scale of humanity, now watch the dichotomies here, to tame the savage, to civilize the barbarous, to soften the ferocious, to enlighten the ignorant, and to spread blessings of Christianity, let us pray, among the heathen than all the missionaries that philanthropy and religion have ever sent forth. That's really, so he's like going all the way with that, right? I mean, because there were, as you know, most of the justifications for slavery were economic or thinly veiled, right? But basically economic. And here he's bringing, and that's just pay attention to the parallel, and Charles talked about this, he always talks about this, and Julietta talked about this as well, the parallel between the way in which Jews and blacks are used by others to create their identity. Now, different kinds of identity. The plantation owner creates his identity, this guy creates his identity in relationship to the negation of the other. And he's using a Christian text to do that, right? So it gets a little bit to the question of how we inherit texts that may not be amenable to us, right, that we find difficult or problematic. Okay. Any questions up until this point? No?
Plus, he's quoting somebody.
Right, right. The scholar, of course, is saying, like, you want to see the footnote. Okay, later, okay? Okay. Now, it's just the term ended so long ago, so I am a Milton addiction, so every now and then I just have to teach Milton because it's in my veins. Right, Naomi, is that like that's you for Ariosto or Tasso or something like that? And Milton too. She's a bigger nerd than I am, right? Right. We're doing this because I want to together kind of do an exercise and see the way in which Milton is doing exactly what we're talking about, and doing it in extremely complicated and interesting ways. And that will set us up for a further conversation, because Milton will also not be a model for us for identity formation, because Milton's conception of identity formation is, again, appropriation. Milton's got two enemies, Jews and the Catholics, right? Because Protestants and Catholics didn't get along back then, right? And they were really the devil to one another. Anyway, so I mentioned this text, I think, last time. This is a Latin translation. What is the title of this in Hebrew? A Perky de Rabbi Eliezer. And that it's just the chapters of Rabbi Eliezer. He, as I mentioned before, this particular collection of midrashim focus a lot on Genesis. And Milton took them, stole them for his work. Who here has read Paradise Lost? Oh, Naomi, put your hand down. Stop showing off, yeah? Okay. This is what we're going to do, okay? I'm going to read this first because it's really, really hard. And when I read it, you're going to understand it because I'm going to read it in a way that's understandable. It's one of the things I can do. If anybody needs somebody to read poetry, I'm a good volunteer, right? And then what I would like to do is to, ready for pedagogical innovation here, to break into groups of 3 or 4, and you 3 are not allowed to sit next to each, to be in the same group, right? You have to be in different groups. And let them be a model for you, right? Let's talk to people we haven't talked to before, okay? And what we're going to do in this exercise together is to note the different traditions that Milton is referring to. Milton lives in the 17th century. He's really a Puritan poet, which is a contradiction. Milton is, and he has affinities with the Jews. Because of this, and Midrash, the rabbis understand, like Protestants understand, that you cannot imagine the divine. Somebody was telling me here that they're part of a church. Lisa, it was you? Just the big cross, right? Why is that?
No cross.
No cross? So why are there no pictures on the wall?
It's just it's the charismatic / non-denominational look of a church.
Okay, that was the Vogue definition. Now give me the theological definition.
No graven image.
Yeah, no graven.
No graven image. So right. So and the rabbis overcome that by writing midrash, and Milton and other poets of the 17th century overcome that by writing poetry. And Milton takes a risk and he writes sacred poetry. He basically he claims to be an inspired poet, whatever that means, right? So when I read this together, we'll talk about the first 5 lines together, and then we'll read the whole thing, and then we'll break into groups and just identify the different traditions about which Milton is talking. So, since we were talking about Midrash, I don't know if I named Paradise Lost this before, but Paradise Lost is the greatest Midrash on Genesis. So if there was somebody, very religious here, they would say, what about the rabbis' Midrashim? And I would say, no, Milton, 12 books, it is really the greatest Midrash on Genesis. Christian Midrash, right? And we'll pay attention to that, right? The first 5 lines give us a sense of Milton's idea of time. If you were to, for our purposes now, time has the structure of the sound of a clock. Does anybody here remember what a clock sounds like? You have clocks? What's the sound a clock makes? Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. One of my great professors Frank Kermode, you should read his book called The Sense of an Ending.
He was your professor?
Wow, that was the requisite ooh, right?
I
Right. So he said, this is why he's such a great professor, that the time is structured like the sound of a clock. There's a tick, and there's a tock. Tick, tock. How many parts are there in that? Oh, you guys fell for it, right? So easily, right? So, and I just want to, before we go back to the math, for Kermode, I'm just saying, this is him describing the nature of Christian time, which begins in the beginning and ends in Revelations. Most monotheistic traditions have similar forms, if not the same thing, in structure. And he uses that to understand literary texts. But let's go back to the tick-tock. Somebody tell me why it's not 2 but 3. Not you, Naomi.
Why is it two?
Why is it 3 and not 2? Thank you.
Because of the Trinity?
Let me do it. Can I dramatize? All right, James. In the interval, right? The interval. Some Jewish children wake up in the morning and they say one of Maimonides' principles of faith. Can I say that here? It's cool. Ani ma'amin, I believe, be'amuna shlema, in perfect faith, beviat hamashiach, in the coming of the Messiah. Va'afal pishahu hitmameya, afal pishahu hitmameya, even though he tarries. Im kol ze, ani echakelo. If with all of this, I still believe he's coming. I think you got it from the way I put the emphasis on it. What is the all of this? The interval, right? The waiting. The waiting. So that's we've just given an introduction to the first 5 lines. Of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe with loss of Eden, till one greater man restore us. We don't really have the tick here because we're already in the middle, right? And what does the middle look like for Milton? What words get associated with being in the middle? Woe, death, right? And then Milton, already in the first 5 lines of the poem, tells us the end. Till one greater man restore us. Who is he referring to? Jesus, right? Right? Okay, so, and that's kind of the temporal. So I would have thought, oh, I just read the whole poem. That's what Milton wants me to understand in reading his poem, that im kol zeh, with all of this hardship, with all of this struggle, with all of this, there's still the possibility of redemption. Not only the possibility, but it's on the horizon. Not here, but it's on the horizon. It's very important to say not here, because when you say it's here, you become a messianist and you bring theology and politics together, right? People who claim that the messianic realm is upon us and want to act like this, and there's some politicians in Israel who are like this, are dangerous because they are conflating 2 different realms. When, as we said, when Messiah comes, then we can all have a conversation. Okay, so I'm going to read the rest of it, and then we'll break into groups. Sing, heavenly muse, that on the secret top of Oreb, or of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. You see the chutzpah of Milton as a poet? He quotes Genesis in his poem, right? Milton is simultaneously the most humble poet and the most chutzpahdik poet. You know what do I need to translate chutzpah for anybody? Chutzpah, how would you translate it?
have no idea. With the gall?
Yeah, it's like, you have the chutzpah to say that? You are presumptuous, right? Okay, so we're going back. So, or, one of Milton's favorite words is or if Sion hill delight thee more, and Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song. Nomi probably can help with that. That with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount. He's talking not now about his style. He says he's not going to write in a middle style or a low style. He's writing in a high style. Okay? Just giving you that so you can read it a little bit later. While it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. That's chutzpah, right?
It is chutzpah, especially because he lifted that line from
Okay, no, we'll talk later, Naomi, okay? Okay. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest. Thou from the first was present, and with mighty wings outspread, dove-like, satst brooding on the vast abyss, and made it pregnant. What in me is dark, illumine. What is low, raise and support, that to the height of this great argument, I may assert eternal providence and justify the ways of God to men.
Whoa.
I will be on Broadway. I got a woe from that, meaning, so I read it in such a way that you could hear it. Yeah? Okay? Yeah?
Can you give us just a little
Yeah.
background on what is this Paradise Lost and why he
Okay, it's a very good question. Thank you. So when Milton describes loss, it's not only existential loss, it's not only the loss of the Garden of Eden. That's one. It's also a means for him to describe his existential loss. He was blind by the end of his life. His revolutionary party, which went against King Charles, had lost. When, and this is a very interesting point, when the Civil War was over and Milton was a main spokesman for the parliamentarians, the regicides, the people who killed the king, King Charles II, who was returning from France, he issued an amnesty, right? He issues an amnesty, but he said we have to set examples. So there were 20 people on the list, and Milton was one of the people on the list. But because he had friends in high places, Andrew Marvell and John Dryden, great poets of the next generation, they got him off. But he lived the end of his life in poverty and blindness and in political defeat. And for him, politics and theology were the same thing. He saw his country abandoning the vision of Christianity that he had, and the failure of that. So he really died, and because he was blind, all of his enemies said, "God cursed you. You see, you're blind. Right? God cursed you." Of course, Milton talks a lot about his blindness in this text. Is that okay? Yeah. Okay.
This is towards the end of his life.
Oh, right. This is his last poem. So he's writing a poem about theological loss, woe, death, and suffering, and our state of being. It's when he says, this is the better answer, why do God's ways need to be justified to men? Ask your rabbi, your priest, your imam. Why do God's ways need to be justified? David laughs knowingly.
Was this his question?
Yeah, that's what he's doing. That's what he's saying he's going to do.
But did he understood?
Yeah. He was. This is what he was going for.
Okay.
To justify the way of should justify the ways of God to men. What? Come on, guys. I don't believe in God because of the Holocaust. Why do you need to justify God's ways?
You don't.
Listen, yeah, I always start with the question. I feel the question first, right? In the world of the Beit Midrash, of the house of study, you feel the kasha, right? I'm happy to have answers, but I want to feel the difficulty of the question. How do you explain evil in the world?
It's also theodicy.
Oh, thank you. I don't know your name. John. So John uses the term theodicy. You know what that means? It's actually, if you look it up in the dictionary, it will say to justify the ways of God to men. Leibniz, the philosopher, in 1713 first used the word and called the book Theodicy. Now, he's interesting because he has no questions. Milton feels the question. Why does Milton feel the question? Because of the background that I gave you. He was suffering loss. And the reason Paradise Lost succeeds as a theodicy is because it fails. Because once it succeeds, it fails. Because if it succeeds in a way that's too obvious, if you give me a false consolation, I'm going to reject it. But anyway, when it fails, Milton's Paradise Lost ends with Adam and Eve leaving the Garden of Eden, and they go out in the world, and Michael, the angel who's instructed them in reading, says, you're ready to go out in the world and read. You have a paradise within the holier far, something like that, right? Anyway, and what is that paradise within? The ability to read, the ability to interpret. So even before we get to what we'll see are these different means of appropriation in this text, we note the way Milton makes certain kinds of demands on us. He's not going to be happy with simple answers. And I think that's one of the things that comes out of our gathering here this week or these past 2 weeks, is any success that we have together, we have to understand we can't cheerlead for ourselves because we have so much work to do, right? And part of that really is acknowledging our differences and being able to tell our stories, as many of us have over the past couple of weeks. Anyway, so why don't you guys break into groups? We'll do this for like 10 minutes. It's just kind of like, it's like Sudoku, you just circle stuff, okay? What are we looking for? Nathan, what's the assignment? So, okay, where are the Hebraic parts? Where are the Christian parts? And where are the Greek parts?
Say that again?
Hebraic, Christian, Greek. Well, guys, you're on your own. Right, Oracle's Greek, right? Right? It's weird, right? Yeah, there you go. Charlie, help you on mine. So I thought they knew it, yeah?
We've got Zion, we've got Sinai, we've got Horeb is Horeb.
Listen, Larry, you're not exempt. You're not exempt. Oh, you're doing it. Oh.
The shepherd, Moses, the shepherd who first taught the children,
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is gonna. What's your name again? Annalise. I'm going to say it in a language that Annalise understands. It's a very hard test, and you're all going to fail, right? So knowing that, what do I expect? I expect you to read. I expect you just to circle words that are meaningful in a Christian context, a Greek context. James just pointed out to me, Oracle is Greek, right? Right. What are some obviously Christian things here? Right. What's the at the end? Right. Okay, you got it?
Making the vast of his pregnant is Kabbalistic. Zohar, supernal mother, gives birth to heaven.
What is the Ionian Mount? Is that Greek?
Well, Ionian is Greek. But what mount that is?
Yeah.
Oracle of God and has how to feel about him.
Okay, they sing. That's why we went. That's the Christian story.
I think the reference to spirit might be Holy Spirit. Chiefly thou spirit that does confer before all things, pure and upright. Now I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Thou from the first was present. That's
Say again?
this line, thou from the first was present. In the beginning, the Word of Spirit, the Holy Spirit. In the beginning, the Word of God. Which is Christian.
No, Orab. O-R.
Dove-like. I think dove is a Christian symbol of spirit.
Yeah, dove probably right.
Well, the dove appeared with
See, or Sinai.
when John the Baptist baptized Jesus, there appearance of dove. This is my son, in whom I am well. I think so. dove may be the Holy
It
Spirit.
shows the seed is the Hebrew. It shows the seed is
Immaculate Conception, right? The dove flies, right? The Spirit makes Mary pregnant. Actually, the Immaculate Conception is the conception of Mary, not of Jesus.
disobedience.
Really? Yeah.
That,
Because Mary has to be a pure vessel.
that was the yeah.
So she was conceived like immaculate. She could be immaculate. She is the immaculate conception.
Whose mortal task brought death into the world.
Isn't the Immaculate Conception the conception of Mary, not of Jesus? Because Mary has to be
Where did the say
Spirit, dove light. It doesn't do that.
It's very Greek. Very, very Greek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
No, it's the Holy Spirit. Dove light says rooting, and you've asked to dissonate it from. I don't know. Just click on the pregnant.
click on the prayer. I think, yeah. Did you ever see an old movie called Song of Bernadette? Yeah, you had a vision of the Virgin Mary at Lourdes. The healing waters of Lourdes.
Yes.
That's those waters were found by
Bernadette.
and on that same the waters where she had a vision of Mary, who said to her, I am the
That was in years.
yeah. Or more.
Right, so anybody could have a vision.
Sign that's literally
When you go to Lourdes, children saw the Virgin, same thing. Some kids come with a story.
Yeah.
Sure, somebody wants to write voice in that. But this is way beyond me. So you say dog is Holy Spirit.
Yeah. The dove is a symbol of the Holy Spirit.
The dog is a symbol of the law of the Lord. You hear that?
Yeah, it's a standing symbol in our
Right, yeah. And the Greek will be what? The Ionian mouth? Where does the Greek come in?
I think the Greek comes in when he invokes the aid of the oracle of God for his song. I think it's
As an oracle, yeah, they use
invoking
oracle.
the muse to find out the Greek literary device. So the muse sings through Homer does the same thing.
Because in the scriptures,
Hebrew would be at the beginning, right?
so I saw that in
On the greater man.
The greater man is Jesus.
Not Abraham?
Well, I'm sure the greater man who will restore us is Jesus.
Okay, the greater man.
Yeah, sing heavenly news, that's Greek. We're ready. Okay, people. We're ready. He's gonna give us things. Okay.
Focus, people. Focus, focus, focus. Okay.
Sounds like a yeshiva.
Rabbi side. Not gonna say that. Okay, guys. Hello.
Moses.
Send me that thing. Send me the thing. I want my.
One, two, one. All right, thank you, Imani. Okay, so so help me out here. I'm going to read it now. We'll read it line by line, and you can tell me if we're calling out any different Greek, Christian, or Hebraic. Sing Heavenly Muse.
Greek.
Why is it Greek?
Muse.
Right, and Homer's poems and Virgil, because he copies Homer, starts with the invocation of the Muse. So what is Milton doing by that? It's very cool what he's doing.
Asking to be inspired.
Pardon? I just didn't hear.
Asking to be inspired.
Yeah. I mean, he's assuming right. He's asking exactly. He's asking for the Muse to speak. Right. But by doing this, I meant what is the move in a literary sense? Homer did this. Virgil did. So just like we said with Virgil that he is the inheritor of Homer, Milton is like inheriting everything that came before him, and he's going to suck it up into himself, right? Sing Heavenly Muse that on the secret top of Oreb. Hands on buzzers?
I just found out that
Oh, can we do a game show format? Marilyn. Hebraic, why? Oh, it's and in Hebrew it's Chorev, right? Horeb, right? And secret. Why would it be called? Why secret top? Also because it's the place of where secrets are revealed. Oh, sorry. Horeb is Mount Sinai, right? It's the place of revelation. It's another name for Mount Sinai, right? An 18th century reader of this was uncomfortable with secret, so he changed it to sacred. Right? Makes it simpler, right?
So it actually says sacred?
No, it says secret. It says secret. This is Milton's text. So that on the secret top of Oreb or of Sinai, didst inspired that shepherd. Who is that shepherd? Hands on buzzers. Whoa. What? We have different. Abraham. Wow. There are no right answers, people. Actually, there are right answers. I think we would say in Hebrew, when you talk about the simple meaning of a text, you call it pshat. So what's pshat? What's the simple meaning? The simple meaning, as Milton intends it. Jesus, right? Right. Okay. There you go. Right. Listen. We're open to other readings. I'm not dissing the other readings, but we're going to come back to them. Okay.
Was Jesus ever referred to as a chief?
Can we can a second? Okay. That shepherd who first taught the chosen seed. Oh wow. Oh my God. So that does complicate things, doesn't it?
It's Moses.
It is Moses. See, you're right, guys. Okay, al-chet, I made a mistake. In the beginning, good. Oh, right. Okay, right. No, sorry, no. So the simple meaning of the text is, as you saying, Moses. Sorry. Right, we're on the same page now. Okay. In the beginning, how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos. We know that's from Genesis. Or if Zion Hill delight thee more, and Siloah's brook. These are places, people, when you go to Jerusalem, you go to Shar Tzion, to Zion Gate. That's what he's referring to. Siloah's brook, what is that? Shiloh, I think, right? Someplace, right? That flowed fast by the oracle of God. If you were grading this paper, what would you say here? If you were grading it, you would say, "What, Milton? You're changing languages in the middle, right? Why do we have this fast by the oracle of God here?" And this is really because we see Milton's appropriation, right? He's appropriating everything.
Is he meaning oracle of God an angel?
He means.
Or just the.
I don't know what he means. We'd have to click on it. I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian Mount. Why is this airplane going above the Aeonian Mount? It's going beyond it, right? The Greeks are low and Milton is high. And then he says it pursues things unattempted yet in prose or rhyme. And chiefly thou, O Spirit? Hands on buzzers? Christian, right? That does prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure. So here is the temple, this temple worship, which is opposed to the individual worship of the heart, right? You don't need the temple since we have the self. Milton does help create the language of the self for everybody here in this room. That's why poetry is so important. It gives us languages to think about things. And chiefly thou, O Spirit, that dost prefer before all temples the upright heart and pure, instruct me, for thou knowest. Thou from the first was present, and with mighty wings spread dove-like, satst brooding on the vast abyss and made it pregnant. What's that? Hebrew, yeah? Does anybody know the verse in Hebrew? You did, you know? Would you mind sharing us the verse in Hebrew?
It doesn't pop up for me.
It doesn't pop up, yeah?
What's dove like? Outspread
Yeah.
wing, that should-
So it's Haruach Mirachefet, I think? Carolyn. What? Can you just read this verse in Genesis? Ruach mirachepet al panei hamayim. The spirit was hovering over the waters. That's the Hebrew, right? So you're right. It's Hebrew, right?
But the dove.
It's representative spirit.
Right. So in my Hebrew school, the Holy Spirit didn't come in, right?
The Holy Spirit is New Testament.
I hear you. So Milton, I mean, he is taking this from the Hebrew scriptures. And when I use the term midrash, remember last time? A way of taking a text and making it your own. Milton takes and he makes it his own, right? He really, really makes it his own. And he makes it his own to such an extent that it's weird about Milton because he simultaneously brings all these sources, but in the end he makes them his own.
He impregnates it with his own.
I'm not doing that. I'm not going there. Merachebet. It's hovering. No, see, and this is Jewish metaphysics is very, very, except for some strands in Kabbalah, is very suspicious of the mixing of the spirit and matter, right? We're the original icon, and matter and body, right? It hovers, right? That point of hovering becomes a discussion for the rabbis. It becomes a discussion for any theologian, for Christians as well. Now let's just go back to shepherd. Who is the shepherd there? This was my confusion before I was reading the end in the beginning, which is always a mistake, right?
I mean, it's weird, it's the shepherd, right, the heavenly muse is God, who's inspiring the shepherd.
Heavenly muse is the Holy Spirit, right? The heavenly muse, also, Milton takes the heavenly muse, and by the end you've forgotten about the Greek, and Spirit. He's made a new Christian muse, right?
The Bible keeps on referring to Jesus as shepherd.
Right.
Okay, well, Jesus is referred to as shepherd. He's a teacher, right? So when you read it again, you see that already implicit in the text is the knowledge of Jesus.
Psalms, the Lord is my shepherd.
Well, that's our Hebraic text, right?
Yes.
And we do not say it's authored by Jesus.
Figure in this? David the shepherd?
David, of course, right? David, of course, right?
One.
Right. It's a metaphor for teaching. So, again, I mean, the shepherd is we are all shepherds. Let's remember that, people, right? Wait. We are all shepherds. And what are the things, and this is why Milton is also an inspiration, is he knew something, and he knew he might be able to express it, but he was really afraid. He was afraid that he might betray the message, so that gave him humility. And eventually, he felt responsible to his students, who we are today, right? And that responsibility makes him, even though he's got amazing doubts about what he's doing, maybe he's saying something he shouldn't say. But that's what we do as teachers. We take risks, right? We take risks, but we do it in relationship to the people who are around us. We try to hear them. And now let's move to the next slide. Thank you for that. You did a great job on Milton. Really, you rocked it. Okay?
Quick question.
Yeah. No, I can't do quick questions. Well, at the end we'll do quick questions, right? So one of the things I have a certain teaching style, and I'm not treating you any different from my students. So, okay. Here is a passage, and now I'm going back to the question: is how do we relate to a tradition that is foreign to us? So, Dante wrote the Inferno in about the 13th century. If you want to know what it looks like, Google Galileo and Dante's Inferno. Galileo actually made a picture of what he imagined Dante's Inferno would be. What does Inferno mean? Hell, right, okay, good. And this is the very, very beginning. Dante has a guide. Who is his guide? Surprise, surprise, Virgil, right? So, and here, there's the recognition scene. Dante meets Virgil. And are you then that Virgil in that fountain of pure speech? My voice grew tremulous. Glory and light of poets. Now may that zeal and love's apprenticeship that I poured out on your heroic verses serve me well. I read you every day, every night. For you are my true master and first author. Now, Dante is a Christian. What is Virgil? Okay. Now, being a pagan is not like being a Republican, right? Right? One of the anxieties of the Renaissance was, how do we bring this non-Christian tradition into our culture? And the Renaissance humanists, whenever you hear them, if you do, your eyes glaze over, but they're the real heroes of Western history, because they went back and they reclaimed the classical tradition and they saved us from fundamentalists, right? And that's why what we do and our learning and our teaching is so important. You are my true master and first author. You see that humility there? It's not they disagree on little things. They disagree on huge things. In fact, there are three parts of Dante's comedy: the Inferno, Purgatorio, Purgatory, and Paradiso. At a certain point, at the end of Purgatorio, Purgatorio is that intermediate step that Catholics believe in. Protestants don't believe in it, right?
We talk about it.
It's cool to talk about, right? So he has to say goodbye to Virgil. You can't come up. You can't come up to paradise. At the beginning, in Canto 4 of the Inferno, we see these people they're in limbo. Who's in limbo?
The people in between
Right.
heaven and hell.
Right. It's like having your flight delayed, right?
Yeah.
Right. Right. So who's in limbo? Homer, Plato, all the people he worships, right? And recently, because Jesus makes a special trip down to get them, the Avot, the patriarchs and the matriarchs. So they start out in limbo, and there's something called the harrowing of hell, the taking up of hell, and the Old Testament figures, but just them, are brought into heaven.
Is that the same thing as extinction? Like that?
I don't know. Right. You can find out a lot about a religion by what heaven looks like. Okay, so here, I want to end here, not with Milton, who, as great as he is, leaves us really not with resources, because Milton ends depressed by himself, and his vision of a community has failed utterly. And it's Shakespeare and Rembrandt who actually allow us to have a future. So this is Rembrandt's mother, and all Rembrandt scholars will say it was Rembrandt's mother posed for the picture, right? But then there's huge arguments. Is it his mother? Is it Hannah from the book of Samuel? Is it Anna from the Gospel of Luke, right? When, of course, it's all of them, right? It's all of them. That's the genius of Rembrandt, right? He keeps everybody on stage. Now, keeping everybody on stage is not easy. The line is from Hamlet. Oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space. You see that Shakespeare with Milton is inventing the modern, right? We do not have conceptions of the mind yet like this. This is like breaking news here, right? So literature is so important. Oh God, I could be bounded in a nutshell and count myself a king of infinite space. And to show us that he's a modern, were it not that I have bad dreams. Isn't that sometimes how you feel like? Right? The expansive sense of self, but with that expansive sense of self comes difficulty. That's we are challenged as teachers to convey this sense of self and agency and urgency to our students. Just want to look at this face one more time. If you can see on Rembrandt's brow, Describe this picture for me. Describe the painting. He's worried.
It's a dark side of.
You see, there's almost two sides to the painting, right? He does this all the time.
You call that Rembrandt lighting.
You call that Rembrandt lighting. That's what our historians write. Right.
When one's part of the show.
Right. No, so Rembrandt is known for his use of light. You see that looks a little bit like an owl figure around his right eye? Just look at that eye.
His right eye.
Left eye. His left eye. His left eye. You might not have to see it on your computer screen, because you sometimes have the sense that Rembrandt is just looking at you. Right? He's just
exactly,
right. And also Hamlet, the expression "the mind's eye" is first used in Hamlet. Rembrandt is painting the mind's eye. And that's one of the things we've learned here together, that if we don't have a mind's eye, what is meant by mind's eye? Beautiful metaphor, right?
Consciousness.
It's a form of consciousness, right? Seeing myself in relationship to other people. That self-consciousness is really, I think that's the takeaway. The sense, all the things that we have learned. But to be good instructors, and this is a really hard thing about it being teachers, we have to be the non-defensive ones in the classroom, right? And what does it mean to be non-defensive in the classroom? You have to take a step back. You let other people express themselves. You guide the conversation of others. Your politics don't matter at that moment. Your beliefs don't matter at that moment. Rembrandt and Shakespeare create that world, right? Where the mind's eye, and obviously we know, and we've talked from the very beginning about the relationship between anti-Semitism and democracy. Anti-Semitism, as Charles says all the time, is the canary in the coal mine, right? It's just the beginning. So when we talk about this kind of teaching, we're not just talking about teaching anti-Semitism or the Holocaust. It's how we teach everything, right? And I would say, and I'm not like Carlton and Diane and Naya, experts on how to put syllabi together, but I would say that having that distance and thinking of it as something, Carlton said it, something that I'm going to do. I'm going to make it. I'm going to make it for myself because it expresses who I am, and I'm going to make it for my audience as well. That's why I asked Diane during one of the talks that she gave, why don't I just steal a syllabus off the site? There are 60 of them there. And Diane told me, right, this is yours, right? And that's hard. I see the little blood on the top of Rembrandt's head. To be a human, and Rembrandt is representing the human, it's almost the shock of the human. If you have time to go to the National Gallery, do that. There's a portrait there, and you look at it, and I have to look away, because it's like the shock of the human. It's amazing. Once I walk in second Daniel, and just for an inspirational ending, I said I'd start with Oxford and end with Oxford. Let's see if this is going to work. This is the multimedia part. How do I make it work?
Yep.
It is not incumbent upon you to finish the work, but you are not free to exempt yourself from it. That is from Perky Avot. And sometimes it's really lonely. So let's take some questions. Daniel.
So thank you for that.
Okay.
A nice perspective. And it's great to be in the Milton world for a little bit.
It's a nice escape, yeah.
So thank you for that. But zooming out, when is appropriation sinister?
That's great. Great question.
When is appropriation a compliment? I'm trying, as we're going through this, I was trying to think of, Palestinians in the Arab world, they're incensed that the Jews have appropriated falafel.
Okay. Whatever, yeah. Yeah.
And in another context, I think about Chinese appropriation of American trade secrets.
Oh, that's a little different, right? That's different, though, right? Food and secrets are different, right?
Or, but again, I'm just.
No, I understand. I think
general question
yeah.
is, again,
It's a secret recipe.
how do you view this in the context of anti-Semitism?
No, so I think we've all been challenged by stories here that are not our own. And we have to find ways of being able to relate to them, right? And being able to relate to them in such a way, not only, as I said last time, where we're telling our stories, we're listening to other people, which is of course important, but telling our stories with kindness, that leaving room for other people when we're speaking. That's a very hard thing to do. It's counterintuitive, right? And unless you see it modeled by a good teacher, you're probably not going to do it. A good teacher could be, a parent, or a priest, or a rabbi, anybody, right? When you see people who behave in such a manner, that's like, oh, that's a possibility. I can do that also. Yes, and
I have two questions.
Okay.
One is,
I didn't really answer your question, Daniel. I mean, there's a book by Michael, a book that's based upon Virginia Woolf's The Waves. Oh, not The Waves, Mrs. Dalloway. It's the exact same story, right? The Hours, right? Is it Mrs. Dalloway that it's based on? Yeah?
It's got a little Dalloway and a little bit of Lighthouse.
Right, so but would you say, what's the author's name? Michael, whatever, okay. So would that be reverence or appropriation in your view?
Reverence.
Yes, right? Right? You know it when you see it. You feel the reverence. Yes, Naya. Naya. Yeah. No, let's hear Naya first, yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's I want to piggyback on that
Good.
for a second. We use the term appropriation a lot, and we've used it throughout the week. It's a
Good.
negative connotation.
Right, for sure.
But I don't think what Milton is doing, in my view, is appropriation. I think it's the most honorable
for
thing
sure.
of taking from tradition.
No, I agree with you. I mean,
As a Jew, I'm not like, oh my God,
well,
he's appropriating
okay,
Genesis.
wait, no. So right, and for me, it's very easy to teach in the 21st century. But you should just know that. I mean, I'm an Orthodox Jew that studies Milton, right? If I would not count in Milton's prayer quorum or his minyan, right? During that period, there's no such thing as anti-Semitism. It's just because anti-Semitism is a political movement in the 19th century. It's just the way in which the New Testament understands the Hebrew Scriptures, and we are the excluded, right? That was one, yeah.
And the second question
Yeah.
is, what advice do you have in teaching to Jewish students Christian texts? So, for instance,
So first of all, I just say that's a very important point. Always think of audience. Yeah. Go
I
ahead.
was teaching Dostoevsky's short stories
Yeah.
from his late period, and it was deeply religious, infused with Russian Orthodoxy. This notion of suffering, needing to suffer in order to love, and the Jewish kids did not understand. They could not access that idea.
Okay, so listen, I'm not a high school teacher, and it's different, I think, a little bit in university. But when I read Milton, I have to step into his world, right? T.S. Eliot, who was a Protestant, writes brilliant essays on Dante, and he talks about suspending your disbelief. You know what that means? To suspend your disbelief. Is that Coleridge or somebody? Something like that, right? Whatever, right? So suspending your disbelief means I'm entering your world. And this is where we have to be brave ourselves and acknowledge our students' difference, because you have to tell them, and teaching Milton brings resistances, because he's a white, male Christian, right? You can say to them, just like Virgil says to Dante, just like Dante says to Virgil, I'm going to learn from you. You can even be my master, but I'm not taking you all the way with me. I'm leaving you behind. You're not part of my story to the end. But thank you for getting me here, right? Meaning, and that's, I think, an important part of healthy religious conversions. Don't emphasize renunciation, but more continuity, right? I'm now continuous with who? Sorry, yeah. Shireen, yeah.
So the issue of cultural appropriation is
Yeah.
quite interesting from an Indigenous perspective, because it's something that Indigenous people are very sensitive about.
What context are you talking about?
Indigenous. I'm just bringing my background as an Indigenous person, that we're very sensitive to cultural appropriation.
I understand. I just want everybody to know you're from New Zealand, right? Yeah, right. Yeah.
Wait, New Zealand. Yeah.
Sorry.
But my question is that I see a lot of Christians going to Israel, visiting, buying shofars, buying talit. They come back and then they start to use these things in their own worship, And of course, they're doing that because they want to feel a connection to Israel, and for them, it's sort of a way of honouring, you know, Jewish people and Israel. But then I know that a lot of Jewish friends I have are really offended.
Why are they offended?
And see that as appropriation.
Aren't they just souvenirs?
Well, no, because they're using them.
They use it as the new Jews, new covenant.
In their worship settings, they're using them for worship.
But I think to piggyback on that, as a Levi, as somebody who traces, you know, who's indigenous to the region, my ancestors, you know,
Yeah, exactly.
right? So, I mean, where does cultural appropriation in this conversation start? You know, Jesus was a Jewish guy resisting European colonialism. And, you know...
That's an interesting narrative.
And the covenant, you know, the covenant was broken, and there's a new covenant, and we're out of favor. And the Jew has the new, you know, is the Messiah.
Right.
And we're all going, the indigenous people are going to hell. And then you have 2,000 years of problems. So it goes.
I wouldn't. That's not a war I would fight. I mean, that's not a war I would fight.
No, I know you don't.
Yeah.
I get it.
Yeah.
But it's a war that.
No, her example. Her example.
I don't know, but no. No, just if I could.
Just by a show of hands, I'd just like to get a sense of how many Jewish people are really offended by that use of shofars, talit, and Jewish symbols.
Yeah, it's a good question.
Not I.
Not at all.
David, you? No.
But Shireen, I really want to go deeper. I really want to.
I don't.
I really want to go. No, so people are in the contemporary context taking talit, prayer shawls, and shofars, and they're using it as sort of like this. I don't know, born again Jewish Christian Messianic Judaism.
Ah, that part.
Yeah. So that's why they're using it.
I see.
Okay, but I think you know. You said sort of flippantly, that's not a war that you want to fight. When I mentioned the indigeneity of the Jewish people to Israel.
No,
No, let me finish, please.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'll just be about 30 to 60 seconds. But it is a war that's been thrust upon us. It is a war that in many instances, historically, we don't have the choice. We don't have the choice to fight or not to fight. And I think the history of Jew hatred, anti-Semitism, is really driven by this history, by this perception of the Jew as the other, as blinded, as the cause of all sorts of issues. So it's a war that we don't want to fight, but it's a war that's been imposed historically on us. So, you know, as a Levi, you know, no, really, as a Levi.
Yeah.
I know how my ancestors dealt with this situation, right?
What?
The Levi's were the teachers.
Your way ancestors.
The Levi's were the priests, the teachers. They were the ones who didn't have the land because we were, you know, couldn't have the land because we were too emotional or too, you know, we were the, yes. No, there's a tradition of it. And we were the ones who, you know, with the golden calf, we dealt with people who worship the golden calf. There is a tradition. But
Right.
apropos,
Right.
would you like to address that?
No, I
That's okay.
As
Next
no,
question.
no, I do. When the way I didn't understand it in its missionary context, because I think in its missionary context,
What
it
you
becomes,
was saying.
yeah,
But I'm going even deeper.
right. That no, once you talk about that, then it becomes much more problematic. So I think Nomi and then or you do you're
And Jalal's been.
wait a second, you're yielding the floor to Carolyn. Carolyn, go ahead.
Okay. No, I just wanted to say that I think there is a difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. When appropriation is neglecting, first like taking many times sacred artifacts or practices and using them in a way that is not respectful, and not recognizing that some things that are being adopted are actually not recognizing racism, oppression, and things like this. For instance, in the U.S. to have a non-black woman to braid her hair in its account of the cultural appropriation that does not recognize issues of
That is considered a cultural appropriation. Yeah. So Megan. Oh no, Nomi, did you want to?
Please let Carolyn express
Sorry.
herself. If everybody can
Sorry.
please listen. Carolyn, the floor is yours.
And we left the actual community to say if it feels cultural appropriation or appreciation. We can let Jewish people to say what it feels to them. So I think it was right that you asked Jewish people.
But you and I are different.
Right. But it's always like this, right?
But, I mean, also,
Yeah.
you know, and I hope I don't offend anybody saying by this, like, I absolutely adored Milton, and I agree, you sort of insert yourself into his world, and, you know, I've spent a lot of time kind of teaching Renaissance art, which requires me really to understand Catholic and Protestant theology, but I think it's really important to, like, this is also the question of how you read, right, the Hebrew Bible versus the Old Testament, and, you know, I think, right, and if somebody is like talking to me about like, oh, like I can say, yes, you know, Hannah prefigures, you know, the Virgin Mary or whatever, but when somebody sits down with me and says, well, no, you're not reading the Bible correctly, right, this is how you're supposed to, so I feel like it's a sensitive, but also really perennial issue that in some ways underlies a lot of what we've been discussing about anti-Semitism, so is something that we need to be conscious of, right? That part of this issue of anti-Semitism emerges from two different ways of reading the text.
One thing I just think that your life as a scholar demonstrates is that you can go into text from a different tradition and you can actually make your own identity stronger, right? Which is counterintuitive, but true. Yeah, Jalal.
Yeah, I wanted to approach appropriation through the lens of interpretation.
Always that. Yeah.
Yeah, we know that society evolves, concepts evolve, and everything changes, right? That takes me to what you said at the very beginning of that test that we had, or some kind of game. You said that you all will fail, right? And
I was joking.
no, but I just follow my.
Okay.
So and then you had a couple of things wrong, right?
Good.
And at the end,
Good.
you said, at the end, you kept saying actually your explanation, your interpretation of the test, so the text, right?
Yeah.
So what makes your interpretation the right one, knowing that?
So first of all, the first thing to say is the most important thing you can say as a teacher is I don't know or I was wrong, right?
Yeah.
Most important thing you can say. And I'm a literary scholar, it's my expertise. I'm happy to sit with you and talk to you about it, and I realize that I'm taking a position of expertise without you knowing who I am or what I do, but it is my expertise. I mean, and certain tendencies within the humanities classroom undermine the whole conception of expertise. We need to keep our experts. We need to respect our experts, right? And because being an expert allows you to say, I don't know, because you know what knowing is, right? Yeah, Aaron.
Yeah, I think, on your question, I think it's deeper than Christians taking tallits and prayer shawls and shofars. I think it's deeper than cultural appropriation. I think for 2,000 years, we've robbed Jews of their culture. We've taken it to ourselves, and maybe the shofars and other things are just the last vestiges that we can steal and take. So I think it's more than just appropriation. I think we've erased.
Aaron, do you have personal experience of this? Oh, he's a pastor.
He's also Jewish and a
Okay.
former pastor, so he's living in both those.
Like all of us here, he's hybrid. Yes, no, sorry, Haley.
I just want to say too, that where I live, you know, it's extremely conservative. It's a common occurrence to see churches and homes fly the Israeli flag. They are not Jewish. They do not have knowledge of any Jewish history, the context. They believe Jews are damned. And I'm not kidding.
Are they Southern Baptists?
There are a lot of Southern Baptists, a lot of non-denominational. I find it very hurtful. And I mean, I have my own inner conflict, but I think like that kind of interpretation. I mean, to Carolyn's point, like appreciation or appropriation, like co-opting a story,
Mm.
that is an entirely different story
Mhm.
without the context of
Mhm.
Judaism.
Mhm.
And I think it's
Thank you, Hallie, thank you. Megan, yeah?
I mean, this is not about what you're saying, Holly, or any, what we talk about with appropriation. I want to throw out another idea out there. It's a term, it's in the study of anti-Semitism. We haven't really talked about it, and I don't want to get into the debate of is it anti-Semitic or not in itself, but the idea of philo-Semitism.
Philo-Semitism.
Yeah.
That's the opposite of anti-Semitism.
Yeah, it's seen as the opposite.
Not
of
quite.
Depends on who you ask.
Not quite.
Okay, she's good.
Yeah.
It's seen as like a deep admiration for the Jews as a people to the point of even emulation or whatever. But it's also seen possibly as anti-Semitic in the sense of Jews are still othered and placed as different or not us. So, anyways,
The first Philo-Semites, or some of them, were in early modern England, and they were Philo-Semites translating Hebraic texts with no Jews in the country, right? Yeah. Tom, yeah.
Yeah, so thank you both for your presentation and thoughts on Milton. I wonder what you think about Samson Agonistes, right? Milton's late, very Jewish work. Samson, Hebrew, Agonistes, Greek, and in this later work, is he finding greater comfort and solace deeper in the Hebrew scriptures?
Okay, so Tom, it's a little inside baseball, but I do want to address your question, right? So Tom is talking about Milton's last work. It's a very controversial work, and I'll just talk about it because it is a classic example of a midrash. Where does Samson show up in the Hebrew scriptures? Which book? Judges, right? Right. So Milton wrote Samson Agonistes, which is his Christian Greek appropriation of the Hebraic. The rabbis have their own version of Samson in Midrash, and Rembrandt has 4 Samson paintings, right? So those stories become ways of expressing themselves. How they use that, I mean, it's a great question, Tom. Why they are attracted to that text is a great question, but will require a little bit longer. Anyway, so laser, yeah, this will be it, yeah?
I'm somewhat perplexed by the by the directionality of appropriation. I grew up as an Orthodox Jew, so I'm sitting here in Oxford and appropriating a ton of English culture.
You're learning. It's called learning.
Well, yes, but I'm saying.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
So then why? To me, we always honor cultures that allow Jews to be part of the culture and to be part, right? Not to be separate, not to be isolated in ghettos as in Italy, but to be part of the culture. If Jews participate in the culture, they are taking on the culture, learning and appropriating. So to me, I think that the word appropriation, let me just finish, the word appropriation can be very, very misused and cover, inadvertently cover cooperation, common humanity, learning from each other, all of these good things.
Can I ask you a question? Are you speaking about appropriation, or are you speaking about integration and or assimilation?
I'm speaking about the fact that the word appropriation is misused to cover those things sometimes. That's what I'm saying. It's a misuse of the word appropriation to cover some very positive things.
Exactly.
That's positive?
Yes.
What? Integration, assimilation. Assimilation is positive?
Integration is positive.
Always?
Well, it's not always negative.
Acceptance is positive.
Okay. I don't want to
No, I'm good.
appropriate the space, but
No, it's our common space now. I yield the floor.
I'll just say that in my work on Canadian racism and colonialism, what was fascinating is you have the British model and you have the British model and the French model. The British model of colonialism, and it happened in Canada, was segregationist. Nobody could integrate. The white British people were separate from the indigenous people, from the Jews, from black Canadians, separation. The French, and ultimate segregation results in apartheid and even genocide. The French, on the other hand, were assimilationists. So everybody was encouraged to become French, men, women, and they had to abandon their culture. So you speak your language, you practice your religion, you're punished. And in fact, according to international law, the extreme of assimilation is a form of cultural genocide. So we have to be careful how we integrate, how we separate, how we assimilate.
But there are two extremes, right? There's the segregation versus
Yeah,
total.
so it's not always evident.
Okay, take one more second just to say, I'm not gonna be here Thursday, Friday, I know the day goes quickly from this point, so I just wanted to say, thank you, Charles, for having me, thank you everybody for including me. I have been to thousands of conferences in my life. I have never felt such a family environment as this kind of a sense of being talk about home, being intellectually at home and your family members. Both the warmth and the friendliness and the exchange of ideas has been just remarkable among all the conferences I've ever been in my life, and I applaud each and every one of you.
Thank you.
And I just want to add, from an assimilationist perspective, we celebrated your birthday last week, but today, I believe, is your Hebrew birthday.
Is that true?
First place yellow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh.
Mazel
Happy
tov.
birthday
Mazel
again.
tov. Mazel tov.
I'm so assimilated, I celebrated the wrong birthday.
So
That's
good.
next year.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Nice point.
Wonderful. Yeah. On that
Nice
note.
pickup. Wow.
You've really blossomed over the past 2 weeks, Larry.
So see you at 4:30.
You've